Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14, presented by Stakes, ready to do SEC basketball power rankings for week whatever this is. We're doing this December the 5th. As always, we start at the bottom. The South Carolina Gamecocks are 14th. But let's give credit to Carolina. It did beat Georgetown in an overtime game, which I watched a good bit of this weekend. So Carolina gets a road win over what a Big East team.
Although I wouldn't go much further than that.
Not a great Big East team.
Yeah,
look, I'm trying to give credit here.
I appreciate that, but let's not act like this was a season-defining win here. And I'm not knocking South Carolina, but yes, it was one where Georgetown is. I mean, they've had their struggles, as we know, and they're off to a 4-5 start. But someone had to win the game, and South Carolina won it, and that's what matters. But yes, it's still I mean, to me, it makes the loss at George Washington even that more baffling. That they lost by 24 in that game, and then they turned around and beat Georgetown in overtime, both on the road. Those two games were, but yeah, I mean, South Carolina, as we've said before. I just think that they are the team that has the furthest to go, and we've seen that to this point in the season. And I just think you're going to have a lot of those perhaps swings where one game they may just not look great, and the next game they may surprise you a little bit. But I just think it's going to be an up and down season for the Gamecocks.
The Gamecocks, one of two teams that's right at 500 this morning. The other one we'll get to not too long from now, but first the Georgia Bulldogs, who are 7-2, but have beaten no one and have lost their only two games against challenging teams to Wake Forest and UAB by double digits.
Yeah, you said it. I mean, the net. Let me just say this: like, we do these every week, but like this is one of those where like last week's to this week, like there's not a lot that's changed. I know the net rankings come out. Georgia's got 7 wins. All 7 of them are quad 4 wins. And so, like you said, there's just not a whole lot to figure out with them right now. They've lost the two opponents that are the best, UAB and Wake Forest, but everything else, they play Georgia Tech on Tuesday. They play Notre Dame, which, that will be a challenging game here in about 2 weeks. Beyond that, still don't really know what to expect from Georgia.
Yeah, I think the 3 bottom teams are pretty clear right now, although I could make an exception for number 11, which we'll get into. But number 12 is Vanderbilt, which is also 4-4. The Commodores do not have a win in quad 1 or quad 2. Struggled to beat Wofford without Jordan Wright this weekend. And frankly, I don't see a lot of upside for Vanderbilt beyond where the Commodores are this morning, which again is number 12.
Wofford's a team that almost won an LSU, and so I don't think that's as bad of a win as some may, look at it and feel like it is. It's really not. I think it's a pretty solid win from that standpoint. And I mean, Vanderbilt's played I don't want to say it's like, it's not been a juggernaut schedule, but it hasn't been one either where, it's
there's
not
been one give me win so far. That's been it.
Yeah, I was going to say there hasn't been a lot of those, and so I think that's something, and may pay off. I mean, they've still got to play games against Pitt and NC State before they get to conference play. So I think there's something to that, and I think they'll pick up some wins here heading into just given their schedule. But yeah, it's still a team that I probably don't think has the same upside as maybe I thought they would going into the season, but I also don't see it as a team, Chris, that's just going to get blown out by a lot of people. I think they'll be right there in a lot of games they play. Maybe not against some of the top teams in the SEC, but I think that's just kind of what you expect from Jerry Stackhouse's teams. Is they may have some frustrating games, and they will have some, but I also don't see them as a team that is bad enough that they're just going to get blown out by a lot of people. So we'll just see if they can kind of close that gap.
Okay, speaking of frustrating, one of the 2 most frustrating teams to me is next. That's Texas A&M at 11. The Aggies have got 3 losses. They were by 9 to Murray State on a neutral floor, and this is not vintage Murray State, I don't think. At least Ken Palm doesn't think so. Lost by 28 to Colorado on a neutral floor, and then lost to Boise State this weekend. Boise State 57 in Ken Palm. That score was 86-71 semi-home. Let's see, where was that played? That was played in Fort Worth. So in any case, the only top 100 Ken Palm win for A&M right now is 93. This was a team that we had some questions about. I didn't really see the offensive firepower that I kind of wanted to see from people that had A&M ranked in the top 20. But you know what? Right now, Ken Palm's got A&M 40th in offense, 91 in defense. So I guess offense has been maybe a little better than we thought. Defense, which is Buzz Williams's trademark, seems to have slipped a little bit, at least according to the early computer numbers.
Yeah, I don't. I think the offense is still not great. It's
You're sending teams to the foul line a lot on defense, by the way. That's one of the issues.
Well, one of the things about this team coming in the season, we said, is we're going to get the production from in terms of like making jump shots and 3-point shots, right? We've only got one guy that's hit more than 8 threes this season. And when you think about that, if you really look at it, they've played 8 games. So if you've only got one guy that's hit more than 8 threes, right? Everybody else is, I mean, at best making 1 a game, and it's not everybody that's hit 8. So it's like Wade Taylor's the only one. He's hit 17 threes. No one else has hit more than 8. And so I think that's, but that's not really their style. They're not going to take a ton of threes either. But I just think like that's an element they don't have offensively. And I think, like you said, it's getting to the free throw line. Like that's their game. And it's kind of that aggressive type of style that we've talked about before. And some nights that will work. Some nights, if you're not getting to the free throw line enough, it's how do you figure out your offense? And right now, I think that's something that you've really got to look at with this team. And I mean, they've shot 215 free throws. If I look that up nationally, my guess is that's going to be right up there, Chris, because I just think
they are 150th in free throw percentage, and they are 9th in free throws to field goals.
Yeah, so let's see here.
A lot of free throws when the Aggies play.
7th in the nation. Free throw attempts per game. They're averaging 27 free throws a game. So that's the 7th most in the country. So I think that's it. Like they're having to rely on that because I think elsewhere, it's just there's not a lot of maybe steady offense that. And then again, like you said, they're putting up points, but I don't know. This is a hard team to figure out. I don't think they have that just next level offensive. I mean, again, Taylor's played well. Let's give him credit. Like I think he's having a good season, but beyond that, I think there's still some question marks.
Well, and you can't write off Buzz Williams. It seems like the Aggies kind of do this every year.
Well,
they don't really.
You better realize that you can't wait this long because.
Well, yes,
you know what
because
I mean?
it
like
bit you a year
right?
ago.
Yeah,
right.
So, yeah, you got to figure it out. And again, the schedule. I mean, we talked about it, Chris. I mean, what's their best win to this point? DePaul.
That's the only.
They're going to have one opportunity.
Team.
One opportunity for a quality win in the non-conference. That's going to be Memphis, and that's it.
Yeah, so. Better win a lot of SEC games. And, of course, remember last year the Aggies lost 8 in a row and in my opinion, should have made the NCAA tournament. We had a large video about that a year ago, which I was very vehement in my opinions about that. I do not back down from those, but goodness gracious, A&M, you got to play better this year. Okay, number 10, a team that I don't know what to do with a month into the season with still really the Ole Miss Rebels.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I mean, they've lost 2 games, back-to-back games, Oklahoma and Memphis. They had their chances against Oklahoma. I mean, the Memphis game was pretty much all Memphis. They got off to a good start in that one, and just kind of one where Ole Miss was just fighting from behind the entire way. So they're another one where I think it's it's the same thing, right? I mean, Deshaun Ruffin just came back, played his first game in that game against Memphis, only played 15 minutes, something like that. So I think once they get him back into the swing of things, I think we'll have a better read on what Ole Miss is. But I think to this point, it's hard to judge exactly what they can be. Right now, they feel like an NIT type team. But again, I think it remains to be seen what that looks like. Can they? I think they'll solve some of their turnover issues, getting Ruffin back, and those kind of things. I mean, Amari Abram has played well. I know he didn't have a great game against Memphis, but I just think Ole Miss is an incomplete for me right now until we get more of a sample size, I think.
My other in the list, two most disappointing teams, the Florida Gators, who really have not beaten anybody of consequence. I know they beat Florida State. Florida State's not very good this year, but 3 top 60 KenPom opportunities for wins. Florida's lost them all. That was to Florida Atlantic, Xavier, and West Virginia. The Gators are beating up on the bad teams and surprisingly 34th in the country in three-point percentage, which I think is where we thought Florida might struggle. Man, I don't know what to make of this team. It's just the team that I expected better results from so far than the Gators have delivered.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you have Colin Castleton, you're gonna still, see what I think, they can do because I mean he's still Colin Castleton, right? He's still a guy that's gonna affect the game in a lot of different ways, and I think this is still a team that will. I think they're going to be right there still with a chance, to make the tournament. I just think to this point, when you look at their best opportunities, right, getting blown out against West Virginia, losing a tough game against Xavier. By the way, let's not sleep on Florida Atlantic. That may wind up not being a bad
Yeah,
loss at
Florida
all
Atlantic
because
is not far from the top
Dust,
50 in KenPom.
Dusty May has done a good job there, and I think he's got a really good team. Their only loss on the season's at Ole Miss, and that was game 2 of the season. So I think that's a team that will, have a chance to, be right there with UAB and North Texas, Western Kentucky at the top of Conference USA. So I think I wouldn't sleep on that loss necessarily, but let's just call it what it is. Florida's biggest opportunity of the season. Where can they get to? We will find out on Wednesday because they play UConn, and that's a home game. That's the biggest game of the season to this point for Florida. And we've talked about how good UConn is. They've not lost a game. They look fantastic against Alabama. Um, that's a
Yes, they
team
did.
that is going to defend. They're going to be physical. How does Florida handle that? I think this will, because against West Virginia, it wasn't great, right? I mean, let's call it what it is. And so I'm very curious to see because you think stylistically, I know they're different teams, but talking about a Bob Huggins coach team and a Hurley coach team, a Dan Hurley coach team. There are some similarities there in terms of the aggressiveness and probably how they want to play. So we learn a lot more about Florida on Wednesday.
Well, here it is with Florida. I'm looking at Colin Castleton's stat lines here. Had a 3-game stretch where he takes 18 shots from the field, scores 33 points in a win over Kennesaw State, takes 22 shots from the field, scores 30 in a loss to Florida Atlantic. That was a 2-point defeat, and then scores 25 on 14 shots from the field in a win over Florida State November the 18th. Since that time, they lose to Xavier. He scores 11 on 13 shots, but this is where it really gets weird, Blake. His last 4 games, working from the most recent, he's taken 8, 8, 6, and 6 shots from the floor. Now, to be fair, I've not watched those games, but it seems like teams are really clamping down on him and not letting him get off shots, which is probably what I would do too. Either that or there's been a change of philosophy from the Todd Golden side.
Well, I mean, it's been interesting because, Lofton hasn't played the past couple games. Bonham's been more involved. He's taking more shots. And he's hitting a lot of threes. So yeah, I mean, he's like I said, though, Castleton's what makes him go, and they've got to keep him involved, or especially against UConn, right? I think that's a team where talk about Sonogo in there and all those guys. I mean, that's a team where he's got to be a big part of what they do because that's a fun matchup there in terms of seeing what Castleton can do against Sonogo. And you talk about foul trouble and what that could look like for Florida would not be good. So yeah, I think clearly he's going to be what can get them where they want to go. I just think right now going through some growing pains. I think in Todd Golden's first season.
Okay, next up, and it seems like this team has been planted here all year or within a spot or two. LSU at number 8. The Tigers have played one game against Ken Palm top 100 opposition. They lost set one 61-59 to Kansas State. Otherwise, have swept everybody else. The most recent 2 games being 3-point wins. Excuse me, a 3-point win over Wofford and a 4-point win over UT Arlington. Not always impressive, but the Tigers keep winning.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at some things about, like, for example, like Florida. Florida's got 6 wins, right? Well, all 6 have come against quad 3, quad 4. LSU's got 7 wins. All 7, quad 3, quad 4. Vanderbilt's got 4 wins, quad 3, quad 4. A&M 5, quad 3, quad 4. Georgia 7, quad 4. So you're
This is
sensing a
not
theme
making me
here.
feel great about the bottom half of the league.
You're sensing a theme here, Chris. Is like we've not yet seen when these teams have had the opportunities to play better competition. We've not seen a lot of SEC teams rise to the occasion. Now, I'm not saying not everybody, because we're going to get to some of those teams in a second, but that can be something I think that's a little bit discouraging. Ole Miss, has got the one quad 1 win, and I assume that was against Florida Atlantic. Maybe I'm wrong on that,
Yeah,
but
it was.
yeah, and the other,
I think it had to be.
the other 5 came against, as we said, Kentucky's, which we'll get to. Kentucky, all 6 of their wins, where have they come from? Quad 3, quad 4. And we're not saying, like, this is non-conference play, right? It's what you expect. You're not going to go out and schedule nothing but quad 1 and quad 2 games in the non-conference. I get it. But I'm just pointing out, it seems like when teams have had opportunities, and it's like for LSU, I mean, they've really only had one game that is considered kind of an upper tier. Like I said, Wofford's not bad, Akron's not bad, but Kansas State was that one, and we talked about kind of the strange finish to that one in the Cayman Islands. But still, here we go. We talk about opportunities, right? Like the LSU basically gets 8 days off here, and they don't play again until December 10th, which will be, I guess, Saturday. They play Wake Forest. There's an opportunity, but there's really no one else on their non-conference schedule that's going to give them any sort of boost from a conference or from a NCAA tournament standpoint. And remember what we talked about, how tough their SEC slate is early on, which maybe doesn't look as tough right now because A&M hasn't performed as well, Florida either, but it's still really tough. And so, yeah, LSU's got to, they're 7-1, but they got to make the most of their opportunities. And a win against Wake Forest, it wouldn't be significant from that's the win that gets you maybe into the tournament or anything, but it would be significant in terms of they just need one like that before they get to conference play.
Yeah, because that is the last opportunity. Everybody else is 200 plus in Ken Palm, and I'm presuming that's probably not far off where they are in the net. By the way, Florida Atlantic 23 in the net. Before we get to the top half of the league and start talking about the unbeatens and more, a shout out to our presenting sponsor, Stakes. Get your predictions on the record. You can predict anything in the game for free. See how you measure up against fans and influencers. You can flex your wins. You can broadcast your takes to our community of sports fans with just a few taps on your phone. You can earn credibility, build your public predictions track record by winning competitions and earning NFT trophies for making the perfect calls. Go to playwithstakes.com/14. Use our invite code Southeastern14 for a double welcome bonus. Free to join, free to play. It's a predictions app. It's tons of fun. So get in on the fun with Stakes today. Okay, Blake, we got your client, Dennis Gates. He's got Missouri 9-0. Now, the wins have not exactly been against top-tier competition, but 9-0 is 9-0. Best start for Missouri basketball in quite a while.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, 7 of those from quad 3, quad 4. They got the nice win, though, right, against Wichita State. I thought that was an important win for them, just to go on the road and win a game like that played out the way it did, goes to overtime. They had to kind of battle back there in a couple spots. And you talk about a Ken Palm sort of game win probability. That chart is all over the place in that game. But I mean, that's what you want to see, right? And I think seeing them win a game like that, I mean, it's just, I said it, like, it's a confident team. It's a tough-minded team. they don't really back down from anything. And we talk about depth, and I mean, it may be a different group every night, but I think that's kind of one of the luxuries is that they just have so many guys that are doing a lot of things. And I put out a lot of the SEC stats to this point on Twitter, last week sometime, and I mean, I said I think Demoy Hodge is probably one of the most underrated players in the league right now. He's not getting enough attention because he does so many different things well. And some of the other stats I put out, and again, schedule matters, and I'm not going to ignore that. Like it's had been a great schedule when you look at the strength of the opponents, but they've got one of the best assist to turnover ratios in the country. They're not turning the ball over a whole lot. Now, Chris, is where the fun begins, right? Because we talk about everything that's happened through 9 games. Well, here we go. Because Saturday they get Kansas at home. They got UCF next Saturday. They got Illinois after that. They start SEC play against Kentucky. Then they go to Arkansas. So the next 5 games is really what tells us a lot about this Missouri team and maybe what the upside is, because hadn't been a whole lot to maybe tell of that thus far. I've said they can score points, and I think they'll score points against a lot of teams because they got a lot of options. Defensively, they got to be better. Everyone knows that, but you want to talk about a scene. If they were to find a way to win on Saturday against Kansas, and that's a Kansas team that has looked good at times, but other times, I mean, there are some vulnerabilities there, I think. Man, I think it's going to be a big challenge for Missouri, but this is where we start finding out a lot more about this team.
Would you like a little bit of a sit up in your chair stat with Missouri here? I'm looking at Ken Palm's prediction on that one, and he's got Missouri with a 40% chance to beat Kansas. Now, again, I know that is at Missouri, and that factors in, but it feels like from where Missouri basketball has spent the better part of the last decade, that's one that makes you take a little bit of notice of what Dennis Gates is apparently doing there.
Well, here's the problem. A lot of people judge Missouri based on the schedule, and they just leave it at that. Well, they haven't played anybody, so they're not any good. But if you actually watch them play, that's where you get the visual of, okay, I realize who they're playing at times, but boy, they've got this going for them. They've got that going for them. And I think that's the difference in terms of the thoughts on where Missouri is right now. Is you can either just leave it at they played a bad schedule, or you can say, well, they played a bad schedule, but they can also do a lot of things well. And I think that's where I'm at on them. And well, maybe they don't. Yeah, I think that's kind of one of those things you have to look at. And maybe they don't beat Kansas. Maybe they get blown out against Kansas. But I think with what I've seen to this point, I would feel a lot better about Missouri's upside, even for someone that was probably higher on them than most were heading into the season. To me, they feel like a team. Like they are a team that was built, like we said, with a purpose, and all the pieces just happen to be fitting together pretty nicely so far.
Well, as we do this on Monday morning, Missouri has played no games against Quad 1, 1-0 against Quad 2, 2-0 against Quad 3, 5-0 against Quad 4. That still settles at 34 in the net. So take that for what it's worth. Speaking of the net rankings, this was not something we expected to see. And I know
it's the net rankings, Chris.
You are a huge fan of the net rankings.
Are you kidding me? You act like this is
how big
shocking.
of a fan are you of the net rankings?
I'm not a huge fan at all, but especially 9 games into the season or 8 games into the season. But I know where you're headed, so I'll let you finish.
Well, look, it is, like it or not, it is the metric we have that the NCAA tournament uses, the selection committee is going to use the most, and it is wildly premature. But it is interesting to see our number 6 team in our countdown at number 5 in the net. That's Mississippi State.
Yeah, and for me to be able to get through the rest of this video without coughing, we're going to speed through the rest of these. But Mississippi State, nothing's changed. They're still unbeaten. They still one of the best defensive teams in the country. Still haven't allowed, what was the stat we said last week? Still haven't allowed more than 55 points in a game, which is just remarkable through 8 games. I don't care. Then reminder, they played Marquette and Utah in there. Still haven't allowed more than 55 points in a game this season. So Yeah, A&M, or excuse me, Mississippi State, really good defensively, good rebounding team. Their upside, they're the team right now easily that you look back and say, boy, we didn't give them enough credit because they look good.
Returning experience is working out for them. It really is, because they had several guys that had played a lot of minutes a year ago that came back, and it is meshing really well with what Chris Jans wants to do.
Yep.
Okay. That is Blake's signal to keep moving.
I'm just telling you, my voice is going to go out and the coughs are going to come, so we're going to have to speed through the rest of this one.
Kentucky at 5. Look, Ken Pom has got Kentucky at 5th nationally. We've watched a lot of Kentucky. Look, Kentucky was my preseason pick to win the whole thing. I think it was yours too, or to win the SEC. We're just really disappointed in what we're seeing in the Cats so far. Lots of time to make that up. I mean, Kentucky could still win the whole thing, and I wouldn't be shocked. But where we are now, the Cats have left us wanting for a lot more.
All right, well, I'll just kind of encapsulate our top 5 here. Our top 5 last week, I'm pretty sure is the same as this week because there was no reason to change it from my perspective. I know Kentucky beat Michigan, and that's a nice win. To go to London to get a win like that, they needed it, right? They absolutely had to have it. But I still think Kentucky's got some things to work on. And like I said, I didn't really feel the need to move them ahead of anybody else because last week that's kind of where we had it. And, the 4 teams in front of them really didn't do anything for me to feel like I should move Kentucky up just yet. They can still win the SEC because they haven't played in the SEC games yet. And Cason Wallace is the man. I said that before. We saw that in that game against Michigan. I think the more he's involved, the better chance they have. So, yes, Kentucky may be here where they are with us right now, but they still have the upside of winning the league. And this is just a matter of when you do rankings every week, if you don't really have a reason to move a team a lot or move the teams in front of them behind them, this is just kind of where it stands. So Kentucky may be 5th this week, but they still have the upside of being number 1. So,
okay, I'm going to give you 4-3-2-1 to save your voice, and we did have a little change, and it's because of me. I've got Auburn.
Okay.
We've got Auburn 4, Alabama 3, Tennessee 2, Arkansas 1.
Okay.
Tennessee moved up on the strength of where I put the Vols. I just keep thinking about what Tennessee has done, what our expectation was for the Vols coming into the year, the way Tennessee has made some adjustments that went over Kansas. I mean, look, the top 5 right now, really the top 4, you could argue a lot of different directions. Auburn's unbeaten. Alabama's got that 1 loss to North Carolina in 4 overtimes. Tennessee had the loss to Colorado, 3-4 weeks ago now here in Nashville, and then Arkansas, which has, put together some good wins, beat San Diego State in the Eric Musselman special. Not a lot of clarity for me. I think we're watching a lot of teams. Those top 4 have looked really good at times. They've got a ton of talent. I think particularly the top 3. I see a little bit of talent different. Well, yeah, I mean, we include Kentucky too, but you've got to go on what I think Kentucky may be the most talented team in the league. Yeah, I mean, let's wait a little longer on State, but there's reasons why, and frankly, Missouri too. If Missouri beats Kansas,
yeah,
it is what it is.
Yeah, like you said, top 4. I know you moved Tennessee ahead of Alabama. Like you said, I'm not going to argue. They are where they are right now. We had Arkansas 1 last week. I kept Arkansas 1 in mind this week just because, again, I don't really feel the need to change it. They got Nick Smith, his first, kind of full game back in. That's encouraging, I think, to get him back in there. Played 24 minutes, 16 points against San Jose State. So you're now going to start to see the Nick Smith experience, I think, there for Arkansas. And like you said, so many good things for Tennessee right now defensively, what they're doing. 40 points back-to-back games against McNeese and Alcorn State allowed. In that one, Alabama, still very, very good. And Alabama stretch now, Chris, another one begins at Houston on Saturday. One of the better games of the year thus far, probably. Get Memphis, the Zags after that. So Alabama's tough stretch. They've already had a tough stretch, but it's going to be challenging. And then for Auburn, they just keep on winning. They get Memphis too coming up here on Saturday, so you got to go to USC still. So yeah, these are some really good teams here in this, like I said, top 5, 6, and maybe add Missouri in there if they beat Kansas. So
I'm sorry, I misspoke. Alabama beat North Carolina. It lost to Connecticut. So in any case, we'll go so that Blake can get his voice back. Thank you for watching. If you like what you see, hit the subscribe button. Give us a like. Those things both help us. We've got a lot of stuff coming up. We'll do bowl previews. We'll roll those out soon. We do Wednesday night live streams. In any case, thank you for watching us here at Southeastern 14, presented by Stakes. We'll see you again soon.